Victoria Shun moved quietly through the big house. Her hands held a soft cloth as she cleaned the expensive furniture. The marble floors shined under the bright lights. Everything in the Blackwood mansion was perfect and costly. Victoria had worked here for 6 months now. She kept her head down and did her job well. The house belonged to Marcus Blackwood. He was very rich. People said he was worth billions of dollars. He made his money from computer companies. Marcus was 40 years old and lived alone in this huge house. He had dark hair and cold eyes. Most people were afraid of him. Victoria tried to stay out of his way. Every day Victoria came to work early. She cleaned the rooms, washed the dishes, and made the beds. The house had 20 rooms. It took her all day to clean everything. She was tired when she went home at night, but she needed this job. She had no family and no other place to go. Marcus almost never talked to Victoria. He walked past her like she was not there. Sometimes he had friends over for dinner. These people were also very rich. They wore expensive clothes and talked about money. Victoria served them food and drinks. They never said thank you. They acted like she could not hear them. On this Friday night, Marcus was having another dinner party. 10 people came to eat. With him, the dining room table was set with the best dishes. Victoria cooked the food and served it to the guests. She moved around the table quietly. She filled their wine glasses and brought them more food when they asked. The guests talked and laughed loudly. They spoke about their big houses and fancy cars. One woman showed off her new diamond ring. A man talked about buying a boat. Victoria listened but said nothing. She was used to being ignored. After dinner, Marcus led his guests to the living room. This room had a big piano in the corner. It was black and shiny. The piano was very expensive, but no one ever played it. It was just there to look good. Marcus liked to show it off to his friends. One of the guests, a woman with blonde hair, walked over to the piano. She touched the keys gently. "What a beautiful piano," she said. "Do you play, Marcus?" Marcus laughed. "No, I don't have time for music. I'm too busy making money." All his friends laughed too. "That's too bad," said another guest. "Music is so important." "My daughter plays piano. She practices every day." "Well, maybe someone in this house can play," said the blonde woman. She looked around the room. Marcus's eyes became bright with a mean idea. He looked at Victoria, who was cleaning glasses in the corner. A smile spread across his face, but it was not a kind smile. "Actually," Marcus said loudly, "our maid here says she can play piano." This was not true. Victoria had never said this. She looked up in surprise and fear. All the guests turned to look at Victoria. She felt her face become red. Her hands started to shake. She wanted to run away, but her feet would not move. "Really?" said the blonde woman. "How wonderful. We would love to hear her play." "Yes," said another guest. "It would be so entertaining." Marcus walked over to Victoria. His smile was cruel. "Victoria, why don't you play something for my friends?" "Show them your talent." Victoria's heart beat very fast. She knew Marcus was trying to make her look stupid. He wanted his friends to laugh at her. She was just a maid to them. They thought she was not smart or talented. I don't think—" Victoria started to say. "Oh, don't be shy," Marcus said. His voice was sweet, but his eyes were mean. "I'm sure you know how to play something. Even a simple song would be nice." The guests all agreed. They clapped their hands and smiled. But Victoria could see they were excited to watch her fail. They wanted to laugh at the poor maid who thought she could play piano like rich people. Victoria looked at the piano. It was beautiful and perfect. She had not touched a piano in 3 years. Her fingers remembered how the keys felt, but that was her old life. Now she was just a maid. She was supposed to clean and serve, not play music. "Come on," said Marcus. "Don't keep my guests waiting." Victoria felt trapped. If she said no, Marcus might fire her. She needed this job to pay for food and rent. But if she sat at the piano, everyone would laugh at her. They would think she was trying to be something she was not. The room became very quiet. Everyone was watching her. Victoria felt like she could not breathe. Her past life felt very far away. In that life, she was someone different. In that life, She was important. But that person was gone now. Marcus was enjoying this. He liked having power over people. He liked making them uncomfortable. His friends were the same way. They were bored with their rich lives. Watching someone else suffer was entertainment for them. Maybe she can't really play, said one guest. Perhaps she was lying, said another. Marcus pretended to be disappointed. Victoria, you're not going to disappoint my guests, are you? They were so looking forward to hearing you play. Victoria knew she had to make a choice. She could run away and lose her job. Or she could sit at the piano and face whatever happened next. Her hands were still, shaking, her mouth was dry. She felt sick to her stomach. The piano sat there waiting. The black and white keys looked clean and perfect. Victoria remembered the feeling of playing music. She remembered how it felt to make something beautiful with her hands. But that was before everything went wrong. That was before she lost everything that mattered. Marcus was still smiling his cruel smile. His friends were watching like they were at a show. They expected her to embarrass herself. They expected her to play badly and give them something to laugh about. They would have a funny story to tell at their next party about the maid who thought she could play. Piano. Victoria took a deep breath. She made her decision. Slowly, she walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavy. The room was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. When she reached the piano bench, she stopped. She looked at the keys one more time. Behind her, the guests whispered to each other. They were getting ready to laugh. Marcus crossed his arms and waited. He thought he knew what would happen next. He thought Victoria would embarrass herself and learn her place, but Marcus didn't know who Victoria really was. He didn't know about her past. He didn't know what she was capable of. He was about to find out that some secrets are too big to stay hidden forever. Victoria sat down on the piano bench. Her heart was beating so fast she thought everyone could hear it. The bench was the perfect height. Someone had taken good care of this piano. She could smell the wood polish and see her reflection in the shiny black surface. The guests moved closer. They formed a circle around the piano. Their faces showed excitement, but not the good kind. They were excited to see her fail. They held their wine glasses and whispered to each other. Some of them had their phones ready to record her embarrassment. Take your time, said Marcus, but his voice was not patient. He wanted her to hurry up and make a fool of herself. Victoria's hands rested on her knees. She was wearing her simple black dress that she always wore to work. Her hands were rough from cleaning. Her nails were short and practical. These were not the hands of a lady who played piano at fancy parties. The blonde woman leaned forward. Do you know any classical music? Or maybe just a simple tune? Victoria almost laughed. If only they knew. But she said nothing. She lifted her hands slowly and placed them over the keys. She did not touch them yet. She just held her hands in position. Memories came flooding back. She remembered her first piano lesson when she was 5 years old. Her teacher, Mrs. Kim, had shown her how to curve her fingers. Like you're holding a small ball, Mrs. Kim had said. Victoria remembered practicing for hours every day. Her mother had to call her for dinner because she would not stop playing. Well, said Marcus, we're waiting. Victoria closed her eyes for a moment. She tried to push away the memories. That life was over. That person was gone. She was just Victoria. The maid now, but her fingers remembered. They remembered everything. She decided to play something simple. Maybe a children's song, something that would not surprise anyone. She would play it badly on purpose. Then everyone would laugh and the night would be over. She could go back to being invisible, but when her fingers touched the keys, something happened. The piano felt like an old friend. The keys were perfectly tuned. This was a very expensive instrument. It deserved better than a fake performance. Victoria started to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It was simple and safe. The guests smiled and nodded. This was what they expected. A maid playing a children's song. How cute. How amusing. But Victoria's fingers would not stay simple. Without thinking, she began to add harmony. Then she added variations. The simple song became more complex. Her left hand found bass notes that made the melody richer. Her right hand added decorations that made the tune dance. The guests stopped smiling. This was not what they expected. This sounded ... good. Marcus frowned. He could see that something was wrong with his plan. Victoria was not embarrassing herself. She was playing well. Too well. Victoria tried to stop herself, but she couldn't. Her fingers had a mind of their own. They moved to a different song. This time it was Mozart. A simple piece, but still Mozart. Her hands moved with confidence. The notes flowed perfectly. "My goodness," whispered the blonde woman. "She's really playing." Victoria's eyes were still closed. She was lost in the music now. She forgot about the guests. She forgot about Marcus. She forgot about being a maid. For these few minutes she was herself again. The Mozart piece ended, but Victoria did not stop. Her hands moved to Chopin. This was dangerous territory. Chopin was not simple. Chopin required real skill. But she could not help herself. The music was calling to her. She began to play Chopin's Minute Waltz. Her fingers danced across the keys. The melody was light and playful, but it required perfect technique. Every note had to be clean and precise. This was music for concert halls, not for parlor tricks. The guests stood in shocked silence. Their wine glasses were forgotten. Their phones hung at their sides. This was not what they came to see. This was real music played by real talent. Marcus felt angry and confused. This was not supposed to happen. Victoria was supposed to embarrass herself. She was supposed to remind everyone of her place. Instead, she was making him look foolish. How could a maid play like this? But Victoria was not done. The music had taken control of her. 3 years of silence had built up inside her. All the pain and loss and grief came pouring out through her fingers. She moved from Chopin to Rachmaninoff. This was music that most people could not even pronounce, much less play. Her hands flew across the keys. The melody was passionate and dramatic. It filled the entire room with sound. The piano sang under her touch. Every note was perfect. Every phrase was musical. This was not the playing of an amateur. This was the playing of a master. One of the guests, an older man who knew about music, recognized what he was hearing. "That's Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto," he whispered. "The solo part. This is professional level playing." The blonde woman put her hand to her chest. She felt tears coming to her eyes. The music was so beautiful it hurt. She had never heard anything like this in a private home. Marcus watched Victoria's face. Her eyes were closed, but tears were running down her cheeks. She was not just playing music, she was telling a story. A story of loss and pain and beauty. A story that Marcus did not understand but could feel in his chest. Victoria's body moved with the music. She swayed gently as she played. Her fingers never missed a note. Her timing was perfect. She played with passion and control at the same time. This was what music was supposed to sound like. The room had become a concert hall. The guests had become an audience. They were witnessing something special, something they would remember for the rest of their lives. The maid who was not just a maid. As the piece reached its climax, Victoria played with incredible power. The piano responded to every touch. The sound filled every corner of the room. It was music that demanded attention. Music that commanded respect. Marcus felt something strange in his chest. He had expected to feel superior tonight. He had expected to feel powerful. Instead, he felt small. He felt like he was in the presence of something greater than himself. The music began to slow down. Victoria's fingers became gentle again. She played the ending with such tenderness that several guests began to cry. The last notes hung in the air like a prayer. When Victoria finally stopped playing, the room was completely silent. No one moved, no one spoke. They were all trying to understand what they had just experienced. Victoria opened her eyes. She looked around at the shocked faces. Reality came crashing back. She was still just a maid. She was still in trouble. She had revealed too much. She had shown them who she really was, and that was dangerous. Her hands were shaking again, but for a different reason now. She had broken her own rule. She had let her guard down. She had let them see her secret. Marcus stared at her with new eyes. This was not the woman he thought he knew. This was someone else entirely, someone with a mystery, someone with a past. Someone who had been hiding in plain sight. The silence stretched on. Victoria wanted to run away, but she could not move. She had played her heart out, and now she had to face the consequences. The silence in the room felt heavy. Victoria sat at the piano with her hands in her lap. She could not look at anyone. She stared at the black and white keys that had betrayed her secret. Her heart was still beating fast, but now it was from fear, not from music. Slowly, one person began to clap. It was the older man who knew about classical music. His clapping was slow and respectful. Then the blonde woman joined him. Soon all the guests were clapping. But this was not the polite clapping that rich people do at boring events. This was real applause, the kind that comes from the heart. "Bravo!" called out someone from the back. "That was incredible. I've never heard anything like that," said the blonde woman. Her voice was full of wonder. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Victoria finally looked up. The faces around her had changed completely. Before, they had looked at her with mean excitement. Now they looked at her with respect and amazement. Some of them had tears in their eyes, but Marcus was not clapping. He stood apart from his guests with his arms crossed. His face showed confusion and something that looked like anger. This was not what he had planned. He had wanted to embarrass Victoria, but instead she had amazed everyone. That was professional. "Level playing," said the older man. He stepped forward. "I'm James Hartford. I sit on the board of the symphony orchestra. I know talent when I hear it. Young lady, you are extraordinary." Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. This was exactly what she had feared. People were asking questions. They wanted to know about her background. She could not tell them the truth. The truth was too painful. I just learned a little bit when I was young," Victoria said quietly. Her voice was shaking. "A little bit?" James laughed, but not in a mean way. "My dear, what you just played requires years of serious study, decades even." That was Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. Most professional pianists find that piece challenging. The other guests nodded in agreement. They gathered around Victoria, asking questions all at once. "Where did you study? Who was your teacher? Have you ever performed professionally? Why are you working as a maid?" Victoria felt trapped. She stood up from the piano bench, but the guests surrounded her. Their questions came faster and faster. She could not breathe properly. The room felt too small and too hot. Marcus watched this scene with growing anger. His perfect evening was ruined. His guests were paying more attention to his maid than to him. He was supposed to be the center of attention in his own house. But everyone was focused on Victoria. "That's enough questions," Marcus said loudly. His voice cut through the chatter. "Victoria has work to do." The evening is over, but his guests ignored him. They were too excited about what they had heard. "You must come to our next charity concert," said a woman in a red dress. "We need talent like yours." "I know people in the music industry," said another guest. "I could make some calls." Victoria felt overwhelmed. These people meant well, but they did not understand. She could not go back to that world. That life was over. She had chosen to leave it behind, and she could not go back. "Please," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to clean up the dishes." She tried to move toward the door, but James Hartford gently took her arm. "Wait," he said kindly. "I need to ask you something important." "What is your full name?" Victoria froze. This was the question she had been dreading. If she told him her real name, he might recognize it. People in the classical music world had good memories. They remembered talented musicians, especially ones who disappeared mysteriously. "Victoria Chun," she said, because she had no choice. James's eyes widened. He stared at her face more closely. "Victoria Chun," he repeated slowly. "That name sounds familiar." Victoria's heart sank. She could see the recognition dawning in his eyes. "My God," James whispered. "You're Victoria Chun, the Victoria Chun, the pianist who won the International Chopin competition 5 years ago. The one who was going to be the next great star." The room became quiet again. The guests looked confused. Most of them did not follow classical music closely enough to recognize her name. But James knew exactly who she was. You were supposed to sign with Deutsche Grammophon, James continued. You were going to record a complete Chopin album. You had concerts booked in Vienna, London, New York, and then you just disappeared. Victoria closed her eyes. Her secret was out. The life she had tried so hard to hide from was catching up with her. I remember reading about it in the classical music magazines, James said. One day you were the rising star of the piano world. The next day you were gone. No one knew what happened. There were rumors, but no one knew the truth. Marcus listened to this conversation with growing surprise. His maid was famous. She was someone important in the music world. This changed everything. This made her valuable. What happened? Asked the blonde woman gently. Why did you leave music? Victoria opened her eyes. She looked around at all the faces watching her. These people wanted answers. They wanted to know her story. But her story was private. It was painful. It was not entertainment for rich people at a dinner party. I had my reasons, Victoria said quietly. But your talent, said James. You can't just waste a gift like that. Do you know how rare it is to hear playing like yours? Most people spend their whole lives trying to achieve what you just did effortlessly. It wasn't effortless, Victoria said. The words came out more sharply than she intended. Marcus stepped forward. He could see that his guests were making Victoria uncomfortable, but he did not want to protect her. He wanted to use this situation to his advantage. Well, this is very interesting, Marcus said with a cold smile. It seems our maid has been hiding quite a secret from us. Victoria looked at him with fear. She could see the calculating look in his eyes. He was planning something. She knew that look. It was the same look he had when he planned to humiliate her earlier. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Marcus said to Victoria. My office now. Victoria knew she was in trouble. Marcus was her employer. If she made him angry, she would lose her job. And if she lost this job, she would have nowhere to go. But we're not finished talking, protested James. Victoria, I want to help you get back into music. You're too talented to be wasting your time as a maid. That's very kind of you, Victoria said, but I'm happy with my life now. This was a lie, and everyone could hear it in her voice. She was not happy. She was surviving. There was a big difference. Marcus clapped his hands together. All right, everyone. The evening is over. Thank you for coming. Victoria and I have business to discuss. The guests began to leave reluctantly. They exchanged phone numbers with each other, already planning how they could help Victoria return to music. James Hartford gave Victoria his business card. Call me, he said seriously. Promise me you'll call. Talent like yours belongs on the stage, not hidden away. Victoria took the card but said nothing. She watched as the guests left, talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. They would tell their friends about the maid who turned out to be a famous pianist. Soon, everyone would know. When the last guest left, Victoria found herself alone with Marcus. The house felt very quiet after all the excitement. Marcus walked to his office and Victoria followed him. She felt like she was walking to her execution. Marcus closed the office door behind them. He sat behind his big desk and looked at Victoria with new interest. She stood in front of the desk like a student called to the principal's office. Well, Marcus said slowly, this has been a very educational evening. Marcus could not sleep that night. He lay in his big bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind was full of questions about Victoria. How could his maid be a famous pianist? Why was she working in his house, cleaning toilets and washing dishes? Nothing made sense. At 3 a.m, Marcus gave up trying to sleep. He went to his office and turned on his computer. He typed Victoria Schön pianist into the search engine. The screen filled with results. There were hundreds of articles, photos, and videos. Marcus clicked on the first article. It was from 5 years ago. The headline read, Young pianist Victoria Schön wins international Chopin competition. There was a photo of Victoria on stage holding a large trophy. She was wearing a beautiful blue dress. Her hair was styled perfectly. She looked happy and confident. Marcus stared at the photo. This was definitely the same person who cleaned his house every day. But she looked so different. In the photo, she looked like she belonged in a palace. Now, she looked like a maid. He read the article carefully. It talked about Victoria's amazing performance in the competition. The judges said she had extraordinary talent and deep musical understanding. The article mentioned that she was only 23 years old at the time. It said she was destined for greatness. Marcus found more articles. One was about a concert she gave in Vienna. Another was about her performance with the London Symphony Orchestra. There were reviews that used words like brilliant, breathtaking, and genius. Critics compared her to the greatest pianist in history. He found a video of one of her performances. Marcus had never been interested in classical music before, but he clicked play anyway. The video showed Victoria on stage at Carnegie Hall. She was playing the same piece she had played in his house tonight, but this performance was even more powerful. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. Marcus watched several more videos. In each one, Victoria played with incredible skill and passion. She moved with the music like it was part of her body. Her face showed deep emotion as she played. This was clearly someone who lived for music, but then the article stopped. Marcus noticed that all the recent articles were from 3 years ago or older. After that, there was nothing. It was like Victoria had simply vanished from the music world. Marcus searched for more recent information. He found a few forum posts where classical music fans wondered what had happened to Victoria Chun. Some people guessed that she had gotten married and retired. Others thought she might have been injured. A few suggested that she had suffered a nervous breakdown, but no one knew the real reason why she had disappeared. Marcus found this very strange. Famous people do not usually vanish without explanation. There had to be a story behind her disappearance. Marcus looked at his watch. It was now 5 in the morning. He had been researching for 2 hours, but he still did not understand why Victoria was working as his maid. He decided to search for information about her personal life. This was harder to find. Victoria had been very private about her personal life when she was famous. Most of the articles focused on her music, not her family or relationships. But Marcus eventually found a few small details. He learned that Victoria had grown up in California. Her parents had immigrated from China when she was a baby. Her father worked in a restaurant and her mother cleaned houses. They were not wealthy, but they had worked hard to pay for Victoria's piano lessons. Marcus found an old interview where Victoria talked about her family. She mentioned that she had a younger brother named David. She said that David was her best friend and biggest supporter. She said that everything she did was for her family, especially for David, but Marcus could not find any recent information about Victoria's family. He searched for David Chun, but the name was too common. There were thousands of people with that name. Marcus was getting frustrated. He wanted to understand Victoria's story, but there were too many missing pieces. Why had she left her successful career? Why was she working as a maid? What had happened to make her give up everything? As the sun began to rise, Marcus decided to try a different approach. He searched for news stories from 3 years ago, around the time when Victoria had disappeared from the music world. He looked for anything that might be connected to her. He found several news stories about car accidents in California from that time period. One story made him stop reading. The headline was, "Young man killed in highway accident." The article was short, but it mentioned that the victim was David Chun, age 21, from San Francisco. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Could this be Victoria's brother? He read the article more carefully. It said that David Chun had been driving home from work when another car hit him. The other driver was drunk. David had died instantly. The article mentioned that David was survived by his parents and his older sister, but it did not give their names. Marcus was not sure if this was the right David Chun, but the timing matched perfectly with Victoria's disappearance from the music world. Marcus imagined what it would feel like to lose a younger brother. He had never been close to his own family, but he could understand that such a loss would be devastating. If Victoria had been very close to her brother, his death might explain why she had given up her career, but why would she become a maid? Even if she was grieving, surely she could have found a better job. Victoria was talented and educated. She could have taught music or worked for a music company. Why would she choose to clean houses? Marcus continued searching. He found more information about Victoria's career just before she disappeared. She had been scheduled to record an album with a major record label. She had concerts booked for the next 2 years. She was at the peak of her career, but then suddenly all of these contracts were canceled. The record company released a statement saying that Victoria had personal reasons for withdrawing from her commitments. They wished her well and said they hoped she would return to music soon. Marcus found a few interviews with people who had worked with Victoria. Her former manager said that Victoria had been deeply affected by a family tragedy. Her piano teacher said that Victoria had lost her way and needed time to heal, but none of these people seemed to know where Victoria had gone or what she was doing. She had simply disappeared from their world completely. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He was beginning to understand Victoria's story, but there were still many questions. He could see why she might have needed a break from music after losing her brother. But why had she stayed away for 3 years? And why was she working as a maid instead of doing something related to music? The sun was now fully up. Marcus realized that Victoria would be coming to work soon. He wondered if he should confront her with what he had learned. Part of him was curious about her story, but another part of him was thinking about how he could use this information. Victoria was clearly desperate if she was willing to work as a maid. This meant that Marcus had power over her. He could use her situation to his advantage. He could make her dependent on him. Marcus smiled to himself. Last night he had tried to humiliate Victoria and failed, but now he had information that could give him even more power over her. He knew her secret, and she did not know that he knew. He decided to wait and watch. He would not confront Victoria immediately. Instead, he would observe her more carefully. He would look for signs of her past life. He would try to understand what she was really thinking and feeling. Marcus had always enjoyed having control over people. It was one of the reasons he had become so successful in business. He was good at finding people's weaknesses and using them to get what he wanted. Now he had found Victoria's weakness. She was hiding from something painful in her past. She was afraid of going back to her old life. This fear made her vulnerable, and Marcus could use that vulnerability. But first, he needed to understand her better. He needed to know exactly what she was running from and why she was so determined to stay hidden. Only then could he decide how to use this information to his advantage. Marcus heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Victoria was arriving for work. He quickly closed his computer and prepared to act normal. He would watch her carefully today, looking for clues about her real feelings and motivations. The game was just beginning. Victoria arrived at work the next morning with a heavy heart. She had not slept at all. She kept thinking about what had happened at the dinner party. Her secret was out. James Hartford knew who she was. Soon other people would know too. She used her key to enter the house quietly. Usually Marcus was still sleeping when she arrived. She liked these quiet morning hours when she could work in peace. But today she found Marcus waiting for her in the kitchen. He was drinking coffee and reading something on his phone. "Good morning, Victoria," Marcus said. His voice was calm, but Victoria could sense something different about him. He was looking at her in a new way, like he was studying her. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Victoria replied. She hung up her coat and put on her apron. She tried to act normal, but her hands were shaking slightly. "That was quite a performance last night," Marcus said. He did not look up from his phone. Victoria did not know what to say. She began to gather the cleaning supplies from under the sink. Maybe, if she stayed busy, Marcus would leave her alone. "I had some trouble sleeping last night," Marcus continued. "I kept thinking about what James Hartford said. About you being famous." Victoria froze. She had hoped that Marcus would forget about that part of the evening. She had hoped he would. Just be angry about her playing piano without permission. I'm not famous, Victoria said quietly. Mr. Hartford was confused. Marcus looked up from his phone. His eyes were cold and calculating. Really? Because I did some research last night. Very interesting research. Victoria felt panic rising in her chest. If Marcus had been searching for information about her, he might have found things she did not want him to know. I found lots of articles. About Victoria Chun, the pianist, Marcus said slowly. Amazing talent. International competitions. Concerts at Carnegie Hall, and then nothing. She just disappeared 3 years ago. Victoria's hands gripped the edge of the sink. She could not look at Marcus. She felt like she was going to be sick. The timing is very interesting, Marcus continued. Victoria Chun disappeared from the music world exactly 3 years ago. And you started working here 6 months ago. Where were you for those other 2.5 years? Victoria did not answer. She could not speak. Her throat felt tight and dry. Marcus stood up from the table. He walked over to where Victoria was standing. She could feel him behind her, but she still could not turn around. I also found something else interesting, Marcus said. His voice was softer now, but not kind. A news story about a car accident in California. A young man named David Chun was killed by a drunk driver. The timing matches perfectly with when Victoria Chun disappeared from music. Victoria's knees almost gave out. She gripped the sink harder to keep from falling. Marcus had found out about David. Her worst fear was coming true. Was David Chun your brother? Marcus asked. Victoria finally turned around. Tears were streaming down her face. She could not hide the truth anymore. The pain was written all over her face. Yes, she whispered. Marcus nodded. He had expected this answer. Tell me what happened. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at Marcus with desperation. Please don't make me talk about this. I need this job. I'll work harder. I'll do anything you want. Just please don't fire me. I'm not going to fire you. Marcus said. This surprised Victoria. She had expected him to be angry about her lies. You're not? No, but I want to know your story, all of it, and I want the truth. Victoria sat down at the kitchen table. She felt exhausted. She had been carrying this secret for so long. Part of her was almost relieved that someone finally knew. David was my younger brother, she began. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He was the most important person in my world. When our parents worked long hours, I took care of him. When I started having success with piano, I did it for him. I wanted to make enough money so that he could go to college and have a better life. Marcus sat down across from her. He did not interrupt. 3 years ago, I was at the peak of my career, Victoria continued. I had just signed a recording contract. I was supposed to go on a world tour. Everything I had worked for was finally happening. Victoria paused. The next part was the hardest to tell. I was in New York preparing for a concert. David called me that afternoon. He said he was proud of me. He said he was driving home from his job at a computer store. He wanted to watch my concert on the live stream that night. Victoria's voice broke. She took a deep breath before continuing. 2 hours later, I got a call from the hospital. David had been hit by a drunk driver. He died instantly. I flew home immediately, but it was too late. He was already gone. Marcus watched Victoria's face. He could see the real pain there. This was not an act or a story for sympathy. This was genuine grief. I'm sorry for your loss, Marcus said. He was surprised to find that he meant it. Victoria looked up at him with surprise. She had not expected kindness from Marcus. After David's funeral, I couldn't play piano anymore, Victoria continued. Every time I sat at the piano, I thought about how he would never hear me play again. The music that had brought me so much joy became a reminder of everything I had lost. So you quit? I canceled all my concerts. I broke my recording contract. My manager and my teacher tried to help me, but I couldn't explain to them what I was feeling. I just wanted to disappear. What did you do for money? Victoria looked embarrassed. I used up all my savings paying for David's funeral and medical. Bills, then I sold everything I owned. My piano, my jewelry, my nice clothes. I moved out of my apartment and lived in cheap hotels for a while. Marcus was beginning to understand why Victoria had ended up as a maid. She had literally lost everything. I tried to get jobs related to music, Victoria said. But people in the music world knew who I was. They asked too many questions. They wanted to know why I had quit performing. I couldn't handle talking about it. So you decided to become a maid? I needed work that was simple, something where no one would ask about my past. Cleaning houses was perfect because I could work alone. I could be invisible, Marcus thought about this. Victoria had chosen to be invisible because being visible was too painful. She had hidden her talent because using it reminded her of what she had lost. But you're wasting your gift, Marcus said. David wouldn't want you to give up music because of him. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. Don't tell me what David would want. You didn't know him. Marcus was surprised by her sudden anger. He had never seen Victoria show any strong emotion before. You're right, Marcus said. I didn't know him, but I know talent when I see it. And I know that hiding from your gift isn't going to bring him back. I'm not hiding, Victoria said. I'm surviving. What's the difference? Victoria stared at Marcus. No one had ever asked her that question before. She thought about it for a long moment. Hiding means you're afraid, she said finally. Surviving means you're doing whatever it takes to get through each day. And which one are you doing? Victoria did not answer immediately. She had never really thought about the difference before. She had told herself that she was just surviving, just getting by until the pain went away. But maybe she was also hiding. Maybe she was afraid to face her grief and move forward. I don't know, she said honestly. Marcus nodded. This answer satisfied him more than a quick response would have. Why are you asking me these questions? Victoria asked. What do you want from me? Marcus considered his answer carefully. He had learned a lot about Victoria in the last few minutes. Her story was sad, but it also revealed something important about her character. She was loyal, hardworking, and strong enough to rebuild her life from nothing. I want to understand you, Marcus said. Last night you surprised me. I thought I knew who you were, but I was wrong. Now I want to know who you really are. Victoria looked at Marcus with confusion. This conversation was not going the way she had expected. She had thought he would be angry about her deception. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in her story. Does this mean I still have my job? She asked. Marcus said. But things are going to be different now. Different how? Marcus smiled. It was not his usual cold smile. This one seemed more genuine. We'll see, he said. Over the next few days, things changed between Marcus and Victoria. He no longer ignored her as she worked around the house. Instead, he found reasons to start conversations with her. He asked about her work, about her life, about simple things. Victoria was confused by this new attention, but she answered his questions politely. Marcus also noticed things about Victoria that he had never seen before. She was always careful and thorough in her work. She treated his expensive belongings with respect, even though she had no reason to care about them. She was quiet, but when she did speak, her words were thoughtful and intelligent. On Wednesday afternoon, Marcus found Victoria dusting the piano in the music room. She was being very gentle with the instrument, cleaning each key individually. She seemed lost in thought as she worked. Do you miss it? Marcus asked from the doorway. Victoria looked up, startled. She had not heard him come in. Miss what? Playing, performing the music. Victoria considered the question seriously. No one had asked her this before. Everyone assumed she must miss her old life, but no one had ever asked her directly. Sometimes, she said honestly. When I hear music on the radio, or when I clean this piano, I remember how it felt to play. But then I remember why I stopped. And the feeling goes away. Marcus walked into the room. He sat on the couch that faced the piano. What if the feeling didn't have to go away? What do you mean? What if you could play music without it reminding you of loss? What if it could remind you of good things instead? Victoria shook her head. That's not possible. Every piece of music I know is connected to my old life. My old life is connected to David. I can't separate them. Maybe you don't have to separate them, Marcus said. Maybe you could honor David's memory by playing instead of honoring it by not playing. Victoria stopped dusting the piano. She looked at Marcus with surprise. Why do you care? Why does it matter to you whether I play music or not? Marcus had been asking himself the same question. A week ago, he would not have cared about his Maid's personal problems. But something had changed after he heard Victoria play. He could not stop thinking about the music she had made. It had been beautiful and powerful and real. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced in his wealthy, empty life. I don't know, Marcus said truthfully. Maybe because I've never seen anyone throw away something so valuable. It's not valuable if it causes pain, but what if it didn't have to cause pain? Victoria did not answer. She went back to cleaning the piano, but Marcus could see that she was thinking about his words. The next day, Marcus made a decision. He went to his office and made several phone calls. He spoke to people in the music industry, people who had worked with Victoria before she disappeared. He asked them about her talent, her potential, her character. Everyone he spoke to said the same thing. Victoria Shun had been one of the most promising pianists of her generation. Her disappearance had been a great loss to the music world. Many people had wondered what happened to her and hoped she would return someday. Marcus also called James Hartford, the man who had recognized Victoria at the dinner party. James was very interested to hear from Marcus and eager to help Victoria. In any way possible. She's working as your maid? James asked with disbelief. Marcus, do you understand what a crime that is? Victoria Chin should be performing on the world's greatest stages, not cleaning houses. I'm beginning to understand that, Marcus said. What would it take to get her back into music? Time, patience, and the right support, James said. She would need to practice intensively to get back into performance shape. She would need emotional support to deal with whatever made her leave in the first place. And she would need financial support so she could focus on music instead of worrying about survival. Marcus thought about this conversation for the rest of the day. He had the resources to provide everything James had mentioned. He could give Victoria time, patience, financial support, and access to the best teachers and performance opportunities. But would she accept his help? That evening, Marcus found Victoria in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She was making a simple meal of pasta and vegetables. She worked efficiently, but Marcus noticed that she seemed tired. He wondered when she had last had a day off, or a vacation, or any kind of break from working. Victoria, Marcus said, I want to talk to you about something important. Victoria looked up nervously. Important conversations with employers usually meant bad news for employees. Sit down, Marcus said, gesturing to the table. Victoria wiped her hands on her apron and sat down carefully. She kept her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She looked like she was preparing for punishment. Marcus sat across from her. He had practiced this conversation in his head, but now he was not sure how to begin. I've been thinking about what you told me, he said. About your brother and about why you stopped playing music. Victoria nodded but said nothing. I want to make you an offer, Marcus continued. I want to help you get back into music. Victoria's eyes widened. What? I want to pay for you to study with the best teachers. I want to give you time to practice and prepare. I want to support you while you get ready to perform again. Victoria stared at Marcus like he had lost his mind. Why would you do that? Because you have a gift that shouldn't be wasted. Because music needs voices like yours. Because ... double quotes, Marcus paused. He was not sure how to explain his real reasons. Because I think it's what you're meant to do. Victoria shook her head. I can't. I told you I can't go back to that life. Not the same life, Marcus said. A new life. A different relationship with music. You could play for different reasons now. What reasons? Play for David, play to honor his memory. Play because music is beautiful and the world needs beauty. Play because you have something inside you that wants to come out. Victoria felt tears coming to her eyes. She had not cried in front of Marcus since the day she told him about David, but his words touched something deep inside her. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You don't have to decide right now," Marcus said gently. "Just think about it. I'm not asking you to commit to a concert tour or a recording contract. I'm just asking you to try playing again. See how it feels. What would you want in return?" Victoria asked. She was suspicious of generosity from wealthy people. In her experience, rich people always wanted something back. "Nothing," Marcus said. "This wouldn't be a business deal. It would be ... a gift." Victoria looked at Marcus with confusion. She had worked for him for 6 months, and he had never shown any kindness or generosity before. Why was he being nice to her now? "I don't understand," she said. "Why would you give me such an expensive gift?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He was asking himself the same question. Why did he care about Victoria's future? Why did he want to help her? "Maybe because I've never done anything meaningful with my money," he said finally. "I have more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I've never used it to help anyone. Maybe it's time I started." Victoria studied Marcus's face. She was trying to see if he was being honest or if this was some kind of trick. But his expression seemed genuine. He looked like someone who had just discovered something important about himself. "What if I try and fail?" Victoria asked. "What if I start practicing and realize that I really can't do it anymore?" "Then you'll know," Marcus said. "And you can go back to whatever life you want, but at least you'll know you tried." Victoria thought about this. She had been wondering for 3 years if she could ever play music again. Part of her was curious to find out, but part of her was terrified of the answer. "I need time to think," she said. "Take all the time you need," Marcus said. "The offer will stay open." Victoria nodded and went back to cooking dinner, but her mind was not on the food. She was thinking about Marcus's offer, about music, about David, about the person she used to be and the person she might become. That night, Victoria lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. She thought about what it would feel like to sit at a piano again, not as a maid who was being humiliated, but as a musician who was choosing to play. She thought about David and what he would want for her. She thought about the music that was still inside her, waiting. For the first time in 3 years, Victoria allowed herself to imagine a different future. 2 weeks passed before Victoria gave Marcus her answer. During those weeks, she cleaned his house as usual, but Marcus could see that she was thinking deeply about his offer. Sometimes he caught her standing near the piano, not touching it, but looking at it with longing. Finally, on a Friday morning, Victoria found Marcus in his office. She knocked on the door quietly and waited for permission to enter. "I want to try," she said simply. Marcus looked up from his computer. He had been hoping for this answer, but he was still surprised by how happy it made him feel. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No," Victoria said honestly. "But I think I need to find out if I can do it," Marcus smiled. "Then let's start." The first step was finding Victoria a teacher. Marcus called James Hartford, who recommended several excellent piano instructors. They chose Professor Elena Vasquez, a woman who had taught many successful concert pianists. Professor Vasquez had known Victoria's work from before her disappearance and was excited to work with her again. Marcus also arranged for Victoria to have access to a practice room at the local music conservatory. The room had a beautiful grand piano that was perfectly maintained. Victoria would be able to practice there for several hours each day. On Monday morning, Victoria met Professor Vasquez for the first time in 3 years. The older woman greeted Victoria with tears in her eyes. "My dear child," Professor Vasquez said, embracing Victoria warmly. "I have missed you so much. We all have." Victoria felt emotional too. Professor Vasquez had been like a mother to her. During her early career, seeing her again brought back many memories, both good and painful. "I'm not sure I can do this," Victoria said. "I haven't really played in 3 years." "The music is still inside you," Professor Vasquez said gently. "We just need to help it come out again." They started slowly. Professor Vasquez asked Victoria to play simple scales and exercises. Victoria's fingers were stiff at first, but gradually they remembered their training. The muscle memory was still there, waiting to be awakened. Your technique is still excellent, Professor Vasquez observed. You just need to build up your strength and speed again. Over the next few weeks, Victoria practiced for 3 hours every day. Marcus had arranged for her to have a lighter schedule at the house so she could focus on music. At first, Victoria felt awkward and uncertain. Her fingers fumbled over passages that used to be easy for her, but slowly, things began to improve. Victoria's hands became stronger and more flexible. Her timing became more precise. Most importantly, she began to remember why she had loved music in the first place. Marcus often came to listen to Victoria practice. He would sit quietly in the back of the practice room while she worked on difficult passages. Victoria was nervous about this at first, but she gradually became comfortable with his presence. "Why do you come here?" Victoria asked him one day, during a break. "Because I've never watched someone work so hard for something they love," Marcus said. "It's inspiring." Victoria was surprised by this answer. She had not thought of her practice as inspiring. To her, it felt like a daily struggle to rebuild something that had been broken. "It doesn't feel inspiring," she said. "It feels difficult and scary. That's what makes it inspiring," Marcus said. "You're facing your fears every day and choosing to continue anyway." As the weeks passed, Victoria began to notice changes in herself that went beyond her musical abilities. She was sleeping better. She was eating more. She smiled occasionally, which she had not done in a long time. Music was bringing her back to life in ways she had not expected. Marcus noticed these changes too. Victoria seemed stronger and more confident. She stood up straighter. She spoke with more conviction. She was becoming the person she used to be. But also someone new. One day, Professor Vasquez suggested that Victoria try playing some of the pieces she had performed before her disappearance. Victoria was reluctant at first. These pieces were connected to her old life and to David. She was afraid they would bring back too much pain, but when she finally tried playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1, the piece she had played at Marcus's dinner party, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling only sadness, Victoria felt a connection to David that was comforting rather than painful. She could almost feel him listening to her play. "He would be proud of you," Professor Vasquez said quietly when Victoria finished the piece. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes, but they were not entirely sad tears. For the first time since David's death, thinking about him brought her some peace instead of only grief. Marcus and Victoria also began spending more time together outside of practice sessions. They had dinner together several times, and Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying Victoria's company. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a quiet sense of humor that Marcus had never noticed before. Victoria was surprised to discover that Marcus was more complex than she had originally thought. He was still arrogant and controlling in many ways, but he also had moments of kindness and vulnerability. She began to see that his wealth and success had not brought him happiness. He seemed lonely and searching for something meaningful in his life. "Why did you really decide to help me?" Victoria asked him one evening over dinner. Marcus thought about this question carefully. "I think because you made me realize that I had never used my advantages to help anyone else. I have all this money and power, but I had never done anything good with it. Helping you feels like the first worthwhile thing I've done in years." Victoria was moved by his honesty. She was beginning to understand that helping her was changing Marcus as much as it was changing her. After 2 months of intensive practice, Professor Vasquez suggested that Victoria might be ready to perform for a small audience. The idea terrified Victoria, but she also felt excited about it. She had missed the feeling of sharing music with other people. They planned a small recital at the conservatory. Only a few people would be invited: Marcus, Professor Vasquez, James Hartford, and a few other music lovers. Victoria would play 3 pieces: the Chopin Ballade, a Mozart sonata, and a piece by Debussy that she had never performed before. As the date of the recital approached, Victoria felt nervous but also hopeful. She was not the same person who had walked away from music 3 years ago. She was stronger now, and she had a different relationship with her art. She was not playing for fame or success anymore. She was playing for herself, for David's memory, And for the pure joy of making music, the night before the recital, Victoria could not sleep. She went to the conservatory late at night and sat at the piano in the practice room. She played softly, thinking about how far she had come. Marcus found her there. He had been driving by and seen the lights on in the building. Couldn't sleep. Either? He asked. I keep thinking about tomorrow, Victoria said. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? Marcus sat beside her on the piano bench. You won't fail. But even if you did, it wouldn't matter. What matters is that you tried. What matters is that you found your way back to something you love. Victoria looked at Marcus with gratitude. 6 months ago, he had been just her employer, someone who barely acknowledged her existence. Now he was the person who had helped her find herself again. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you, Marcus replied, for letting me be part of your journey. Victoria smiled and placed her hands on the piano keys one more time before the recital. Tomorrow, she would share her music with others again. Tomorrow, she would take the final step back into the world she had left behind. But tonight she was content to play quietly in the darkness, grateful for the second chance she had been given. The day of Victoria's recital arrived with bright sunshine. Victoria woke up early and spent the morning practicing at home. Her small apartment now had an upright piano that Marcus had bought for her. It was not as grand as the conservatory piano, but it was hers and she loved it. Victoria felt nervous but also excited. This was her first real performance in 3 years. She had chosen her program carefully. Each piece had special meaning for her. The Chopin Ballade reminded her of her brother David and how music had brought them together. The Mozart Sonata represented her classical training and the discipline she had learned. The Debussy piece was something new, representing the person she was becoming. Marcus picked up Victoria that afternoon to drive her to the conservatory. He was wearing a nice suit and looked almost as nervous as she did. How are you feeling? He asked as they drove. Scared and excited at the same time, Victoria said. I keep thinking about all the people who used to come to my concerts. They expected perfection from me. But today feels different. Today I'm playing for people who care about me, not just my music. That's what makes today special, Marcus said. You're not performing for critics or for fame. You're sharing something personal with friends. When they arrived at the conservatory, Victoria was surprised to see more people than she had expected. James Hartford was there, of course, and Professor Vasquez. But there were also several other musicians and music lovers who had heard about Victoria's return. Word had spread through the classical music community that Victoria Chun was performing again among the small audience. Victoria noticed the blonde woman from Marcus's dinner party. She had brought her teenage daughter, who was also a pianist. There were a few music critics who had known Victoria's work before. And in the back row, Victoria saw her former manager, the woman who had tried so hard to convince her not to quit music. I didn't expect so many people, Victoria whispered to Marcus. They're here because they believe in you, Marcus said. They want to support your comeback? Victoria felt touched by this support but also pressured. These people remembered her at her peak. Would she be able to live up to their memories? Professor Vasquez introduced Victoria to the audience. She spoke about Victoria's early promise, her mysterious disappearance, and her courageous decision to return to music. She asked the audience to welcome Victoria back with open hearts. Victoria walked onto the small stage and sat at the piano. The instrument was a beautiful Steinway, similar to the one in Marcus's house where this journey had begun. She adjusted the bench and placed her hands over the keys. For a moment, Victoria closed her eyes and thought about David. She imagined him sitting in the audience, proud and excited to hear her play. She felt his presence with her, not as a source of pain, but as a source of strength. Victoria began with the Mozart Sonata. Her fingers moved with confidence and precision. The music was clean and elegant, showing that her technique had returned to its former level. The audience listened with appreciation, recognizing that they were hearing professional quality playing, but it was the Chopin Ballade that truly moved the audience. This was the piece that Victoria had played at Marcus's dinner party, the piece that had revealed her secret. Now she played it with even more depth and emotion. She poured her grief, her healing, and her hope into every note. Marcus watched from the audience with tears in his eyes. He remembered hearing this piece for the first time 6 months ago. Then Victoria had been a frightened woman hiding her talent. Now she was an artist reclaiming her voice. The transformation was extraordinary. The audience was completely silent during the Chopin. They could feel the emotional power of Victoria's playing. This was not just technical skill, this was music that came from the soul. When the piece ended, there was a moment of complete silence before the applause began. For her final piece, Victoria played the Debussy. This was music that was impressionistic and dreamy, very different from the dramatic Chopin Victoria played. It was sensitivity and nuance, showing that her musical understanding had grown during her time away from performing. When the recital ended, the audience gave Victoria a standing ovation. But this was not the polite applause of a formal concert. This was genuine emotion from people who had witnessed something special. They were celebrating not just good music, but a human triumph over adversity. After the performance, people came up to congratulate Victoria. Her former manager hugged her with tears in her eyes. "I never stopped believing you would come back," she said. "The music world needs you." James Hartford introduced Victoria to several important people in the classical music community. A representative from a recording company asked if she would be interested in making an album. A concert promoter suggested that she might be ready for some small performances. Victoria was overwhelmed by all the attention, but in a good way. She had forgotten what it felt like to be valued for her talent and treated as an important artist. Marcus stayed in the background during these conversations. He was proud of Victoria's success, but he also felt a strange sadness. Now that Victoria was returning to the music world, would she still need him? Would she want to continue their friendship? As the crowd began to disperse, Victoria found Marcus waiting for her near the piano. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "That was beautiful. I'm proud of you." "Thank you for everything," Victoria said. "I couldn't have done this without your help." They drove home together in comfortable silence. Both of them were thinking about what would happen next. Victoria's life was about to change dramatically. She would probably start performing regularly again. She might go on tour or move to a bigger city where there were more opportunities. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked as they pulled into his driveway. "The future," Victoria said. "For the first time in 3 years, I can imagine having a real future again. It's exciting and terrifying." "What do you want that future to look like?" Victoria thought about this question. 6 months ago, she had only wanted to survive each day. Now she had choices and possibilities. "I want to perform again," she said. "But not the way I did before. I want to play music that means something to me. I want to work with people who care about art, not just money. And I want to help other musicians who are struggling the way you helped me." Marcus smiled. "That sounds like a perfect plan." "What about you?" Victoria asked. "What do you want your future to look like?" Marcus had never really thought about this before. He had always focused on making more money and gaining more power. But helping Victoria had shown him that there were other ways to find meaning in life. "I want to do more things like this," he said. "I want to use my resources to help people achieve their dreams. Maybe I could start a foundation for young musicians. Maybe I could support other artists who need a second chance." Victoria looked at Marcus with new respect. He had grown and changed as much as she had during these past months. "We could work together," she suggested. "You understand business and funding. I understand music and what artists need. We could help a lot of people." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Victoria was suggesting that they could continue to be partners, that their relationship did not have to end now that her music career was restarting. Over the following months, Victoria's career bloomed again. She gave more recitals, each one more successful than the last. She signed with a new manager who respected her desire to choose meaningful projects over profitable ones. She began recording an album of pieces that had special significance to her. Marcus kept his promise to support other artists. He started the David Chun Foundation for Musicians, named in honor of Victoria's brother. The foundation provided financial support and mentorship to talented musicians who were facing hardships. Victoria and Marcus worked together to run the foundation. They traveled to different cities to audition young musicians and attend their performances. They spoke at music schools about the importance of perseverance and second chances. Their professional partnership gradually became something deeper. They had both been changed by their journey together. Marcus had learned to value things beyond money and power. Victoria had learned to trust again and to let people into her heart. 1 year after Victoria's first recital, she was invited to perform at Carnegie Hall again. This was the venue where she had given some of her greatest performances before her disappearance. Returning there felt like completing a circle. Marcus sat in the audience that night, watching Victoria command the stage with confidence and grace. She played a program that told the story of her journey, pieces that represented loss, healing, hope, and new beginnings. When the concert ended, the audience gave Victoria a 10-minute standing ovation. Critics later called it one of the most moving performances they had ever witnessed. But for Victoria, the most important moment came when she saw Marcus in the audience. Smiling with pride and love after the concert, Victoria and Marcus walked through Central Park together. It was a warm spring evening, and the city was alive with possibility. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Giving up your first career? Going through all that pain?" Victoria thought about this question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I needed to go through all of that to become who I am now. The person I was before was talented but naive,